Welcome to Countrywise, which this week finds me teetering on the brink, on the very edge of the southeast of England. This is Dungeness, and at first glance you think, there is nothing here. But when we look a little more closely, I think we're going to find that this is one of the most intriguing places in the whole of the south of England. We will also be out on Romney Marsh, rounding up one of its oldest inhabitants. We'll be steaming along the coast on a unique railway built by an eccentric millionaire.
And I'll be revisiting one of the great mysteries of my childhood.
The Countrywise compass has taken us to the most southeasterly corner of Britain. This part of the Kent coast is just 28 miles from France. It's a mixture of seemingly endless shingle beaches and vast areas of marshland. Dungeness in summer feels like walking through the desert. It's dry and desolate and seems to stretch forever without any boundaries. In the distance are two nuclear power stations. Elsewhere, the landscape is peppered with lighthouses, wooden huts, old boats and other strange structures. And yet, believe it or not, this is a national nature reserve, and the warden charged with its protection is Owen Lation.
You've got an amazing richness of flowers and invertebrates and bird life here, in a bit of a paradox with abandonment and old sheds and boats lying around as well. It is the nearest we probably can get to a desert in this country, where you've got this mass of colour and vegetation all shoots up, and then if you come back in the winter time, desolate, very windswept, very cold, a real contrast.
Because we're sticking out, aren't we, into the English Channel here, and you get the full force of the gales coming up.
Yeah, always windy on Dungeness is what the locals will tell you. We are, 5 to 10 miles out into the Channel. Yes, it is a real hostile environment. You've got to be tough to live here.
What are all these old boats here, way above the way above the tide?
What's happened here is basically Dungeness has many pebbles here. Longshore drift, where the pebbles have been swept around the coastline or around the point, and these boats were on the old shoreline.
This was the shoreline?
This was the shoreline. At some stage we would have been sitting with the sea lapping up against our feet.
But the sea is...
Indeed.
Well, it's a bit of a hike away.
Exactly, and what's happened is all this tonnage of shingle has been swept around the point. So there's your boat, and then over time, after a number of storms, after a number of years, the sea has retracted as more shingles piled up. So what you do is you either leave your boat if it's coming to the age where it needs to be decommissioned, or your winch sheds, and you build closer to the tide line. So you have across this landscape a kind of a graveyard of abandoned boats. They haven't been dragged all the way up there, they've just been left at some stage when the tide was very close to where the boats are.
So the whole thing is on the move, is it?
It is all on the move. We're on what we call the Cretan side, where there is a big blip of shingle, which is accreting out into the English Channel.
That's getting bigger over there.
Yeah, about a metre to 2 metres a year. Before they built the power stations, we were getting closer to France by about a metre to 2 metres a year.
I've noticed all round us, you've got these sort of lush green plants, look a bit like cabbages.
Yeah, we've got sea calea, which is in the cabbage family. It's got a lovely big white pom-pom flowers on it, and then it's got the big kind of bobbly kind of seed heads on it. And you've got things like yellow horn poppies, and you've got some very rare plants here as well. But all of it is kind of a plant which is adapted into a hot, dry, hostile environment. And the sheer scale or size of Dungeness makes a place like this unique, in that you could walk across this landscape for miles, coming across plants which otherwise you might not find on other beaches in the country.
What sort of place is it to live?
Well, I like it, and many people want to live on Dungeness, but I think it's one of these places where you either love it or you hate it. We speak to many visitors and people love it, they find it fantastic, desperate to live here, and then other people turn up and not quite sure what to expect and say, oh, we don't like it, it's too windy, it's too maybe desolate or too many pebbles or something.
It's interesting how in the short time that we've been sitting here, the atmosphere is changing, because over there, the fog is creeping in off the sea, isn't it, over the lighthouse?
Indeed, we might hear the foghorn going in a minute now with that low cloud coming in.
This stretch of coast is ever popular with holidaymakers, attracting more than 500,000 of them a year. Indeed, one member of the Countrywise team used to come here as a child to the seaside town of Hythe, and uncovering a couple of historical mysteries was to shape the future for our very own Bethany Hughes.
This little bit of the Kent coast holds a very special place in my heart, because every single holiday, without fail, my brother and I would come down here and use it as a giant playground. The days here were very gentle, full of ice creams and rounders games and little boating trips. But everything around me seemed to hold a secret, a kind of hidden past. And I'm sure that's one of the things that inspired me to become a historian. The Martello Towers around Hythe are a very visible reminder of this coast's past. From these, watchmen would scour the horizon for any sign of an invasion from France. Napoleon's troops were less than 30 miles away across the water, and this was Britain's first line of defence. And I remember discovering that the canal which I used to row on during my holidays wasn't built for recreation, but as another defence against the French. It's quite a feat of engineering, this canal, isn't it?
It is, yeah. When you imagine it was, when you think it was all dug by hand, so it's all dug with shovels and picks, then all the soil was wheelbarrowed out as well. And it had, at its peak, it had 1,500 men working on the canal. So yes, it's a big job.
It was kind of the Channel Tunnel of its day.
That's right, yes, and it probably something akin to the cost of the Channel Tunnel today in terms of the money that was spent on it in those days. Yes, yeah.
Do you think they actually thought this was going to save the country from Napoleon?
I think it was the best thing that they could do at the time. It's the only options that they had open to them. The other option was flooding Romney Marsh, and this was felt as a better option because if you flood the marsh, it takes quite a few days for it to flood. So the canal was built to make the marsh an island and stop Napoleon on the marsh while it could be flooded.
Good plan, but this took so long to build, didn't it? By the time yes. It was finished, the Napoleonic threat had receded anyway.
That's right. Well, they were beset by problems right from the start. It was started in 1804, and it was planned that it would be finished by the following summer. By the time they finished, it was 1809, by which time Napoleon had sort of it was no longer a threat.
Yeah. The Royal Military Canal is now a haven for wildlife and is used to regulate water levels in the nearby marshes, so all that effort wasn't in vain. Now, this is where one of the really serious secrets of Hythe kicks in. It's St Leonard's Church, and I know it looks very picture postcard perfect now, but as kids, this is not somewhere that we would come after dark, because of what is hidden inside the crypt. The 11th century church is the site of a macabre mystery. There are close on 2,000 skulls here and 8,000 thigh bones. My imagination was fired by tales that these were the victims of a battle or people who died from the plague. Their custodian today is the wife of the current vicar. I remember coming here and there were so many theories about how all these remains ended up in here. Do you think any of them are true?
Well, some of them are more interesting than others. I mean, it used to be thought they were from a battle, even a battle with pirates, Danish pirates, which is a rather good story, but probably not very likely, because they're about half and half male and female. And then another theory that they were from the plague. Sadly, that's unlikely also, because they would have been put in quicklime and the bodies disintegrated. And really, we think they're dug up from the graveyard. And then for some unknown reason, they brought them in here. And we think it was about 1500.
Do you know how quickly this place became a kind of tourist attraction?
Straight away, I think. As far as we know, from about 1600, we've got mention of, the church charging, I don't know, a groat or whatever it was for the people to come and have a look.
You almost get the sense that people feel quite affectionately towards this place, whereas you'd automatically think they'd find it really creepy.
Yes. I mean, when I first heard about this, and it's actually just opposite my home, I thought, I don't really fancy that, all these dead bodies, all these skulls. But when you come round, you don't get any sense that it's creepy, really, because they're just ordinary people who've died. People like you and me.
And in a way, maybe very good that we spare them a thought when we come here, that we're reminded of their lives.
It is. It's quite nice. We had one little girl came round. She was about 7 and she was quite quiet while she was coming round. And then after she'd gone, I met her in the town. I happened to be going shopping and she said, "Could I ask you a question?" So I said, "Yes." And she said, "When I die, please could my bones be put in the crypt?" So I had to say, well, we weren't really accepting any new people, but it was a nice thought.
Good, that's
How sweet.
It is, which shows she wasn't scared then.
No.
The shape of the skulls suggests that many of these people had ancestors in northern Italy. Perhaps they were descendants of the Romans who once occupied this area. Another reminder of the way this coast has attracted invaders across the centuries. The name Hythe originally meant either a haven or a landing place. And this whole stretch of Kent coastline does seem to have that kind of ambiguity. It's not just a pretty Garden of England packed with apples and oast houses. This is a corner of the world that worked really hard to defend our country and to make our history.
And this is where we take a break. When we come back, we are here on Romney Marsh, where it is full steam ahead and where a special breed of sheep may safely graze. In a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Countrywise, this week at the southeast corner of Britain. Here, just an hour from the capital, we find a wilderness of shingle beaches and marshland, including the 100 square miles of Romney Marsh. Here, the sheep outnumber the people, and the breed peculiar to this area has evolved into a particularly hardy beast that thrives in the wetlands. I have come to a hillside overlooking the marsh with a man whose family have been Romney sheep farmers for 6 generations. You get an amazing view up here, don't you? I've never seen Romney Marsh from above in all its entirety.
You can see most of it from up here, yeah.
It's vast. I didn't think it was so big. What can we see from here?
You can see Dungeness Power Station. You can see the wind farm near Canberra.
And not today, but on a clear day you can see France with no trouble, I imagine.
Yes, yeah, that's right, yes.
Has the marsh got a kind of atmosphere? I mean, how would you describe it?
It's quite tranquil. It's peaceful in the winter, but bleak.
It is bleak in winter.
It can be, yeah, when it rains and rains and rains.
And you keep here a unique breed of sheep. Now, the Romney sheep is not quite like any other, is it?
No, well, it's indigenous to the area. It's had, well, many, many years of evolving with the landscape and the weather and so on. They've been on this farm for 130 years. It does very well here. It thrives well on the marsh. Also, it's very good at adapting. It's spread all over the world. It's been exported all through the Victorian era, so 1850s, 1860s, 1870s into the southern hemisphere, and been exported into Russia, China, South America.
So it's far from being a dying breed.
Yeah, very much so.
The Romney breed produces particularly fine wool, and a lot of it. And while Paul looks after the sheep, including parting them from their wool, his wife Christina runs a business turning it into high-end woolen products to bring another source of income into the farm.
My husband's always been really enthusiastic about the sheep. I obviously married into the family farm and equally have become quite enthused by the sheep. And
you had no choice in the matter.
Not really, but no, they're lovely animals. But with the fleeces, we always felt it was a really obvious area to go into because, you know, it's a natural renewable resource. And it's really versatile, so we just felt, why not try and see the whole process through, right from a raw fleece to an end product. But I think what's really special with what we're doing is that people can come to this area, and the Romney Marsh is absolutely steeped in history, and the sheep are very much part of that history. So if they buy a throw, they actually know exactly where they've got their product from.
Tell me about Romney Marsh. What kind of place is it to live and to work?
Well, I really enjoy it. Obviously, as I say, Paul's family's been farming on the Romney Marsh for just over 130 years. So, you know, they have real family history, whereas obviously I've moved in at a later stage. It's picturesque. There's so many different changing seasons on the marsh, and that's why I think it's so special. People come from all over the world, really, to see the marsh. I think it's my little haven here, so I really enjoy it.
There is a way to enjoy this haven and its wonderful coastline in just an hour. And it's a very pleasant hour, spent back in an age when travel was relaxing and elegant. This is the world's smallest narrow-gauge railway for fare-paying passengers, running 15 miles between Dungeness and Hythe. The boss is a former British Rail manager who'd longed since childhood to be in charge of this giant train set.
The railway started in the early 1920s. Two pretty eccentric British millionaires who'd made their money from a mixture of gambling, motor racing and real estate in Australia got together. They loved the idea of model engines, but they had to have fast model engines because they were also motor racing enthusiasts. Completely British, completely strange, but they also had the money to make something happen. So these two millionaires, one of them died, the other one decided to make his his life's work to look after it, and he did that until 1964, and at that point it looked like the railway was going to completely shut. And then some years later, the railway was put up for sale, and the present company then took over. 950 shareholders, all with an interest in railways, the Romney Marsh, and prepared to invest with no return. Everything that happens around here is paid for from the fare box of the customers. All of the engines date back to 1925 through to 1937, all built specifically for this line, bar one, and all engineered to be the strongest locomotives in this size of track. Quarter scale track, third scale engines, very powerful. And because of that, we've never had a need to build any new steam engines, because with 11 we have plenty, but what we do need is constantly to overhaul them and keep them in a really tip-top condition, and that's where the effort all goes. I think people love taking railway journeys, and particularly on heritage railways, because there's not a lot of stress to it. It's an easy, comfortable, slow journey that just meanders along. They can take time to look at things, and of course it reminds them of their childhood. The era that most people who are visiting us today remember are the 50s and the 60s, when they came on holiday here, and they're now bringing their children and grandchildren back. A general manager on a steam railway doesn't sit in an office very often, and I'm particularly bad at sitting in the office, probably wrongly so. But yeah, I get to drive trains probably once a fortnight. I get to be a signalman, I get to sell tickets, I get even to wash up in the cafe if I'm lucky. It's everything, because that's the nature of the business. When you're a train driver over the same piece of railway as we are, you get to know every little foible of both your railway and what's alongside you. We see the wildlife appearing in the early mornings, the hare gives us a chase every day as we go along, the pheasants fly up as we disappear past, and so you know each area, as I guess a farmer or somebody else like that would. For me, this is the special place in England that I always want to be at. I have difficulty dragging myself away to other places, in fact, but on a day like today, it's brilliant.
We live on an increasingly crowded little island, and that's why it's so important that we have places like Dungeness and Romney Marsh, places where we can just think and breathe and perhaps get a taste of what it is like to be living on the edge.